Good morning everyone, welcome to our Thursday morning worship. And again, it's lovely to welcome back some more of you into years 2 and 3, back to school for the first time since lockdown. It's been great seeing more and more of you over the last couple of weeks. I'm really looking forward as well next week to welcoming back some of the children in years 4 and 5. So whether you're watching at home or whether you're watching in school, I'm really glad that we're able to spend this little bit of time together. This morning I'm going to share with you another story. This time, instead of reading a story from one of my favourite books, I'm going to read you a story that I've written myself. When I have time, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is sitting down and writing a story or a poem, maybe a funny poem. I know we've got lots of you in school who enjoy similar things, lots of really good story writers in school. I know I've seen a lot of the stories that you've written. I think we might have a number of budding authors in our school. Now, the story I've chosen for you today is one I wrote quite a few years ago, actually, before I was ever a head teacher. It's all about a boy named Joshua who was going through a big change in his life. Now, speaking of changes, life has changed quite a lot for all of us in the past few months, hasn't it? All of a sudden, most of you stopped going into school. Most of your parents stopped going to work. We couldn't see our friends. Things became very different. And actually things keep on changing, don't they? For those of you who've come back to school, it's been a little bit different, but actually you've settled really well. And it's been lovely welcoming you back into school and seeing how well you've settled. One thing that's going to change for all of you in the next couple of months is the class that you're in. Hopefully in September we'll be able to welcome everybody back in school and we'll all be able to start with new classes and so on. Nursery will be moving into reception will be moving into year 1 into year 2 and so on. And our year 6s will actually be leaving us all together to head off for their new secondary schools. We've also got a few other children who will be moving home and going to schools in different parts of the country. Now, I wonder, how does the idea of change make you feel? My guess is that you're likely to have what we call mixed emotions. You'll probably be excited about certain things, the prospect of a new class or a new school, some of the things you might do in a new school, some of the opportunities there'll be, new friends, maybe a new house for some of you. Lots of things to be excited about. But it's also natural to be a little bit nervous, perhaps a little bit anxious, because you're headed into something new, something that you've not done before. You might have questions about it, what it'll be like, what you'll have to do. And at the same time, you'll probably be excited about some of the opportunities that your new school or class will give you. I actually remember moving house myself when I was just 6 years old. There's a picture of me around about that time. What a good looking chap. Moving house is one of my earliest memories. I definitely had mixed emotions about this. There was the excitement when Mum and Dad told me, wondering who my new friends would be, what the house would be like, what my new school would be like. I remember sitting in the big removal van in the front with my dad, looking at the roads as we approached, and then finally seeing my new house. Then I remember racing around the house, going into all the different rooms, working out which one was going to be my room, which one was going to be my sister's room. We went and checked out the garden. I was really pleased because it was flat and grassy and we'd be able to play football and cricket in there. It was definitely exciting. But those weren't the only feelings I had on that day. I was also nervous. I was worried I might not make friends in my new school. I was sad at leaving behind my old friends, my best friends Graham and Debbie. So this morning's story is about this boy Joshua who has recently moved house and has had to start a new school. Wonder how he's coping with the changes. Joshua's love stone. It had all seemed such a good idea at first, but this was serious. Miss Coldstare's glare fixed me, half in my place and half reaching across to Becky Beaker's desk. I closed my fingers over the stone, but knew it was too late. "Thank you, Joshua. Perhaps I'd better take that." Miss Coldstare towered above me, hand outstretched. I swallowed hard and peeled open my fingers. She looked for a moment at the small, polished, heart-shaped stone before plucking it from my hand and dropping it into her pocket. Now all I could do was wait for the end. In just under 5 minutes, the stone would open again. Everyone would know my secret, and what Miss Coldstare would do to me didn't bear thinking about. How I wished I were back at my old school with nice Mrs. Dovecote and all my friends. I could still hear Mum telling me, "You'll love our home by the sea, Josh. You'll make new friends in no time." Well, we'd been there nearly a month now, and guess who was still the only person other than Greasy Gary without a partner for PE. Fact was, I'd had enough. That's why I'd been stupid enough to bring the stone into school. I'd only found it a week before. It was half term and I was messing about on the beach, by myself as usual, when I saw a rock I'd never noticed before. It was red and smoother than all the others, and if I hadn't known better, I'd have said it was shining at me. When I reached the rock, it had stopped glowing, all except for one small, heart-shaped pebble. Of course I took it for my collection, but it was only when I got home that I discovered how special it was. I placed it on the dresser with all my other stones and shells. Then, just as the clock struck 3, it started to shine. This time it definitely wasn't my imagination. It glowed bright red, its light beating rhythmically. Suddenly it flipped itself open like a clamshell and hissed out a spray of red sparks. I didn't move. The sparks huddled into a throbbing cloud before darting all at once into a rather shocked-looking spider on the lampshade. The spider stopped for a second, then swung dreamily on a thread before skipping across the dressing table to a small black hairbrush. The next thing I knew, the spider was dancing. Yeah, dancing with the hairbrush, sweeping it romantically across the table as if it were in love. And then I realised it was in love. What else would a throbbing red, heart-shaped magical stone be for but to make things fall in love? And from the look of that spider, it had fallen head over all 8 heels in love with my hairbrush. Next day, I didn't let the stone out of my sight for a moment. Then, at 3 o'clock, exactly one day after the spider incident, it happened again. I was lounging on the sofa reading a book about shells. Dad was watching the news and the stone was sitting on the coffee table. Suddenly it glowed bright red again, flipped open, and sprayed another cloud of red sparks. This time, the sparks rounded into a heart-shaped mist and shot straight into my dad. Spiders were one thing, but Dad? For a couple of seconds, Dad went rigid and seemed almost to sparkle himself. Then the stone stopped glowing and Dad continued watching the news. Just as I felt sure he was fine, Dad moved his chair right up next to the telly, switched the video on to record, and started dribbling all over Rita DeVita, the newsreader. He spent the next 2 days writing passionate love letters to the Rita DeVita fan club, hanging around outside the news studios, and begging the stunned newsreader to be his wife. If I hadn't managed to get him and Mum together the next time the stone went off, he'd probably have set up camp outside the studios and left home altogether. Over the next few days, I started a love affair between a slug and a pasta twirl. I watched as a sparrow went loopy over a worm, and I even made the old lady next door go all gooey over Gary. Then I had my great idea. I needed new friends and I had the power to make people like me. If I worked things right, I could use the stone to make myself the most popular person in school. It had seemed like a good idea. But now, Miss Coldstare had the stone and I was in it up to my neck. It was 1 minute to 3 and the second hand was ticking my last seconds away. As 3 o'clock struck, Miss Coldstare's pocket began to glow red. Everyone in the class stared as a puff of red glitter shot out and then back into Miss Coldstare. She fizzed, froze, and flopped back to normal. Or nearly normal. Miss Coldstare was taking an unusual interest in the class hamster. Everybody sat, mouths gaping, as she opened the cage door, kissed and cuddled a rather surprised Harry Hamster, and started whispering sweet nothings into his ear. Nobody dare move. Nobody dare breathe. I shrank into my seat, waiting for Miss C to explode. I waited. Everyone waited. Miss C nibbled Harry's ear. Suddenly, Becky Beaker broke into a tiny titter. Then a chuckle, then a snort, then a great snuffling guffaw. And before we knew it, every one of us was falling about with laughter. We giggled, we gurgled, we sobbed, and we roared. Miss Coldstare was gently led away by Mr. Davis, the head, still snuggling up to Harry. I left the classroom with 31 new friends. You know, for making new friends, there's nothing quite like a gigantic giggle at a teacher who's fallen madly in love with the class hamster. So, things turned out all right for Joshua in the end, didn't they? And they turned out all right for me too, after I'd moved house. And things weren't easy at first, but before long I'd made a whole set of new friends. I'd even got the starring role as an angel in the school Christmas play. I thought you might like that picture of me in year 2. It's all right to have mixed feelings when we're facing change. It's perfectly natural, in fact, probably the right thing. But just sometimes, worries about not being accepted or not finding your place in a group can make us do silly things. Sometimes we might try to look big or clever by doing something that actually we know isn't clever at all. Maybe a bit like Joshua deciding to take that stone into school. Sometimes we can try to show off or impress people by doing things that we know aren't right, and perhaps not being true to ourselves. We might try to be someone that we're not, acting big instead of being strong enough to just be ourselves. We all need to believe in ourselves and in our best qualities and show them off. Be the best we can be, whatever the situation and in all senses. Showing kindness and care and taking a pride in ourselves is always likely to help us make friends and make a good impression on people. Now, if you'd like to, I'm going to invite you to pray with me as I say a prayer written by Faye in year 2. Shall we pray? Dear Jesus, let us believe in ourselves and have faith to make a better world. Amen. Thank you to Faye for today's prayer and for reminding us how important it is that we all believe in ourselves and have the courage to be ourselves and to do what we know is right. Okay, that's the end of our worship time for today. I look forward to seeing you all on Monday. God bless you all.